The Space Museum in Moscow is a favorite outing for Soviet families. But on a freezing November afternoon, the museum has 4 visitors from Britain with a very personal interest in what there is to see here. One of these people will become the first Briton in space. For the Soviets, space travel is as old as Yuri Gagarin. For the winning Briton, it will mean a £16 million prize called Mission Juno. The British may be a little late arriving in space, but the Juno mission plans to take off with a flourish. Powered up by its own soar-away ballad, Juno is being launched with all the razzmatazz of the world's first commercial spaceflight, to be fueled by sponsorship, media hype, and marketing. But after all the photo calls and the press conferences, for the would-be astronauts, the Juno mission is a once-in-a-lifetime adventure and a unique contest. This is the inside story of the battle to become an astronaut for Juno. It all began with a remarkable advert. This was the first that Britain's space hopefuls knew of the Juno mission, an advert with an eye-catching headline which appeared in the summer of 1989. It had an irresistible sales pitch.
Whoever is chosen will automatically write themselves into the history books.
13,000 people responded, and an exhaustive program of testing and selection began. Soon the candidates, who had to be between 21 and 40 years old and equipped with a science degree, were whittled down to 150, then to 35. Responsible for making sure that the final candidates had a sober brand of the right stuff was psychologist Stephen White.
We didn't want to select people who were showing any sign of philosophical musings or wondering about the whole scheme of things.
No, we've got a pretty shrewd idea what's going on.
We really wanted people who were lab technicians in space. The last thing that we went for was an ability to follow rules and commands. We didn't really want people who were too individualistic, too liberal-minded. We wanted them to go over to Russia, learn the accepted ways of doing things, do as they're told, and keep their fingers off any red buttons that they're not supposed to push.
By early November, there were just 6 aspiring astronauts left, waiting anxiously for a phone call.
Gordon Brooks?
Gordon Brooks, Peter Howard.
Ah, hello.
You'll be pleased to know that you've been selected as one of the final 4 for the Juno mission.
Great.
It was an agonizing and difficult decision to reduce the number from 6 to 4, and you'll be required to come with us to Moscow next Sunday for a maximum of 2 weeks.
Right. That's good news.
Well, I'm delighted. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. There's a man just rung up. Come through. Says he wants to send me to Moscow. Something about a list of short astronauts.
Oh, well done.
But the bad news is I have to go in about half an hour. So I think swimming's off.
3 other candidates received the welcome phone call that day. One was a 34-year-old Army Major and helicopter instructor, Tim Mace.
The excitement stems right from childhood, as far as I'm concerned. Although, I suppose, in the last few years, when things were impossible in Britain, when you just couldn't go on a space flight, that sort of thing goes out of your mind. But it's always been something that I can remember in childhood, wanting to go up and be weightless.
Although he's Britain's free-fall parachute champion, Tim Mace reckons that the Juno mission will be a total novelty.
Oh, I think we've all thought about the ways it will change us. It is certainly going to change our lives completely. To be involved in the space missions, my aim would be to stay involved.
Helen Sharman's only obvious connection with space flight has been eagerly seized upon by headline writers. She's a research technologist at Mars Confectionery in Slough. But she too was instantly excited by news of the Juno mission.
I first found out about the mission on the way home from work. I heard about it on the radio, and at the time I thought what a really exciting project it was going to be. And I phoned them up when I got home. So I realised that's the thing I had to do. It was very exciting. Well, I was born in 1963, so I was just started school when the first man was on the moon. We did school projects about it, and I remember sticking milk bottle tops on a big sheet of paper to make an Apollo launch look fairly realistic. But no, I was interested in space as general as most kids were at that time, as most kids are now, I think. But I never believed it could happen to me.
What we're trying to do here is we're trying to measure the centre of pitching moment.
Clive Smith is already in the space business. After winning a scholarship to the Space University in Strasbourg, he works as a lecturer in space technology at Kingston Polytechnic.
I suppose the reason that I applied was that I've spent all my career working in the space industry. I thought that it would really be fascinating to find out what the environment's like to work in first-hand, to do the science, the experiments, and actually feel it. Space is, to me, it's the fourth domain where sort of land, sea and air are the ones that we're already using a lot. Space will be used a lot more in the future. When I was 16, I went to Alaska and spent about 4 months there. And when you're in Alaska, because of the high latitude of the place, you can see some of the satellites coming over the pole, glinting in the sunlight. And I sort of thought to myself, I remember sort of thinking to myself, you know, that's quite an interesting phenomenon. Wonder what it is, wonder how it works, what it does.
Gordon Brooks is the only married candidate, a naval doctor with 4 children and a taste for action.
I've been in a few difficult situations in my career to date. I was in the Falklands on a ship that was hit by a couple of Exocet missiles and subsequently sank. After that happened, I was left in the water thinking that perhaps I ought to make the best of my life while I still can. I grew up at a time when most children were running around the playground pretending to be in rockets, and I was no exception. I grew up at a time when space travel was first starting, the first Apollo missions were going up, and I decided I'd go for it at that point, even though this project had not even been thought of. And I wrote to the Minister of Aviation and asked him whether I could go into space. And he wrote back a quite kindly reply, suggesting that 10-year-old boys probably ought not to go into space as it was too dangerous. But if I worked hard, perhaps the opportunity might come in the future, and it appears that it might have done so.
He's a very calm person. He's an infuriatingly calm person, actually. It's very difficult to get him riled on anything at all. I think he is easy to live with because of that. He's a very enthusiastic person. When he decides to do something, he concentrates all his energies and efforts into that and pursues it through to the end.
It is my great privilege to introduce the 4 remaining candidates.
Sunday, November the 5th, at the official announcement of the final 4 candidates for the Juno mission, there's a first experience of the full blast of media attention.
You should have your press backs being handed to you at this point. You will have many questions and there will be opportunities for photographs.
This is only the start of a week where media interest will prove a useful rehearsal for the pressure of G-forces.
Yes. Mr. Brooks, welcome to the studio this evening.
In their first week as trainee astronauts, public relations loom larger than microgravity experiments. The media consultants provided to offer a crash course in media survival via mock interviews.
That's why you were chosen, a bit of the He-Man?
I don't think that's necessarily the case. Perhaps one thing that's in my favour more than others is that I've watched most of the Star Trek episodes and listened to David Bowie incessantly ever since this has been announced.
the last thing I want to do is say get rid of the humour and keep it there. But just be aware sometimes. I think, because we're going to hear you interviewed more than once, I think if I get a lot of Star Trek and David Bowie and things like that, eventually it might begin to type. If anything, Clive, and I'm not here to mould your personality, and please don't anybody think that I am, but I'd like to see a little bit more relaxation, a little bit more humour from you. You do come over as just a touch severe. This is, and I make no apologies for talking purely from the media's point of view, a superb story. It has got virtually everything. But I won't be surprised if at this stage, and you're to be forgiven for this, you're a little bit apprehensive. Because essentially until, a couple of days ago, you were, to all intents and purposes, unknown people. And now you're getting as much coverage in the media as probably anybody else in this country at the moment, except for Mr. Gorbachev.
I'm 26 years old.
What frightens you?
Frightens me. Being on my own for very long periods of time, I think that would frighten me.
Just 4 days before the candidates leave for Moscow and the interviews turn serious. Today the Juno board are due to meet the final 4 and to probe their characters and attitudes in greater depth. The board begin the day by viewing video interviews of each candidate.
But I don't have any heroes.
What would you do if a journalist rang you with allegations about your sex life?
I would deny them completely, because they would be untrue.
When did you last cry, and why?
At the final round of the World Parachute Championships, when after 4 years of work we didn't get the medal, we came fourth.
What frightens you?
Learning Russian.
Who would you say is the ideal sponsor?
From the Juno's point of view, if they're getting desperate, the ideal sponsor is anyone who can come up with the right amount of cash. From my point of view, any sponsor, providing I agreed, perhaps politically with their motivation, would be acceptable.
Under the chairmanship of Conservative MP Sir Geoffrey Patty, a company called Antiquera Limited has been formed to launch and manage the Juno mission on an entirely commercial basis.
My namesake.
The money to set Juno in motion has been provided by the Moscow Narodny Bank. But the board must now seek private sponsorship to cover costs of the £16 million mission.
If and when you're in Mir,
There will be many questions today for the candidates about their personal lives and attitudes.
likely to get angry.
But the toughest and most provocative interrogation comes from Malcolm McGee Brown, a senior manager of the Moscow Narodny Bank, as he seeks to explore the candidates' attitude to sponsorship.
Don't you agree the British government should really be financing this?
I think it would have been nice if the government had been financing in the past. I don't think it's necessary for this mission because, in addition to being a research mission, it's also trying to probe the possibilities of commercialisation of space. And to prove that, the lack of government support or the lack of government money is a help.
So advertising, it's razzmatazz, three-ringed circus. It's not serious, is it, really?
I think it has to be commercial.
Selling Coca-Cola, that's what you said on the video.
I think Coca-Cola would be a good image, personally. I don't think that would be the only image. As far as a three-ring circus is concerned, no. The image of the mission will have to be marketed, otherwise it won't make money.
What if John Player Special offer us $5 million to paint the rocket in their colours?
Personally, I wouldn't be interested. I'm not interested in sponsoring smoking.
Yeah, but I'm going to own your arse when I sign you up. You're going to do what I tell you as the astronaut candidate. So if I tell you to hold up a packet of John Player Special, are you going to be comfortable doing that?
I wouldn't be comfortable, but I'd certainly do it.
So you'd sell your soul for this mission?
I don't think selling the soul comes into it. Having got this far, to become an employee of the company, then I have to both have the enthusiasm for that company to get far and also enthusiasm for the mission. I've got both, and I think it's required that I would do what the company agrees to be done. And I personally don't believe the company would take a smoking advert.
Chocolate companies couldn't care a damn about the scientific experiments we're carrying out.
No, but chocolate companies are very careful in the things that they tend to sponsor anyway. It's very much a PR thing for them. If they seem to sponsor something that perhaps, say, for example, has South African connotations, then they will perhaps tend to back out of that. They don't want anything that's looking in the public eye as though they are backing something that is wrong, a bad thing to do.
What if John Player's Special is going to be one of our major sponsors? Give us £5 million to paint the rocket.
Well, I already know that you would probably not wish that to happen anyway.
Well, we're after money. I don't care what you think we think. What do you think about it?
I don't think the mission should sponsor something that is likely to give it a big disrepute to the mission.
Would you withdraw?
Withdraw? No, because I want to go into space.
So you're prepared to sell your soul for it?
I'm prepared. Wouldn't be prepared to smoke, because I don't smoke, and I think it will be extremely difficult for me, and it also damages my health, so I would not smoke.
What if the British meat industry sponsored us? Would you be prepared to sit there and have the Sunday roast? Helen Sharman with her Yorkshire pud and roast beef? I've already explained to Peter why I'm a vegetarian, and it's because I don't believe in a lot of the farming methods that abound in Britain today. But when we've signed you up, we're going to own your butts. We're going to tell you what to do here, there, and everywhere.
As I've already said, I would be prepared to go if you decide that you want to...
So you're prepared to sponsor roast beef on the television?
Yes.
We own you once you become the astronaut.
Well, it's something that I've considered, that you know, there's a big downside to the mission, in that your life will be changed profoundly, and that you may have to do some things that you're not particularly
You mean you haven't thought about all this?
Oh yes,
I mean, you've been briefed again and again.
Yeah, no, I've thought about it. Yeah.
So if you're doing some sort of smelly man's cosmetic that's the sexiest thing on earth, you're going to have a problem with that?
Oh no, not that sort of thing. No, I mean, if it were, you know, cigarette sort of advertisement, then possibly, yeah. Yeah, but if it's a smelly cosmetic, then it doesn't bother me so much. No, I mean, I use smelly cosmetics.
Thank you.
Do we have any feelings about how the balance of how people did stand up to that particular cross-examination? Because I think there was a sort of spectrum of response, wasn't there, really?
Yes. Helen and Tim actually handled it better, and in very different ways. Tim seems to think extremely quickly. He simply reacts to the question very positively. There are no negatives. Whereas Gordon had a number of sort of kind of throw the question back at you or avoid it. Helen has this lovely twinkly smile. She can partly push the question away and get time to think by her sort of smile and, oh, that's a good question sort of thing. But she again comes back very positively. She doesn't avoid the issue. Gordon did tend to avoid the issue, and Clive was a bit uncertain.
I thought in terms of their presentation, there was a very marked difference between them, but in my view, a very clear order that some of them were articulate and answered questions directly. I thought Helen did very well. I thought Mace did very well in that respect. Quick thinking, gave a positive answer, wouldn't be messed about. And I thought that Gordon, I was disappointed in Gordon, I must say. I thought that he did not answer to questions directly, that he was relatively inarticulate. His answers were often immature, and they were rarely to the point, and I thought that was a shame.
Heathrow Airport, Sunday, November the 12th. A final photo opportunity before the candidates fly off to Moscow.
It's a risky thing to do, but then there's risks in anything that you do in life.
Okay. Best of luck. Thanks very much. Thanks.
Sorry, which one?
I'm Clive Smith.
Mr. Ahmed, Charles Ahmed.
Passport.
Peter Graham, the Juno mission director, is here to see his charges on their way.
Are you travelling to the moon?
We're not going to the moon, but we're hopefully going into space. Space is not very high. It's only sort of 200 kilometres up. The moon's actually hundreds of thousands of kilometres away. It's a long way away. Cheers.
Bye, a nice time.
Best of luck.
Gordon, come on, let's go.
My time to Moscow is 3 hours and 10 minutes.
It's been absolutely frantic. I'd anticipated having a week at work to sort things out, and then off I would fly to Moscow, but it's been press all the time. It's been great fun, of course. I've never been famous.
I didn't know really what they meant when they said our lives weren't going to be our own. I'm beginning to get the impression of what they mean now.
I hope they don't find their 4-foot probe. that's one of the things that we've been a little bit worried about, because the British used a sort of a 2-foot probe on us, and if the 4-foot job comes out, then that might be they'll be up round the corner and round down the side.
We had Katrina, age 5 there. She was pretending to be an announcer, and Douglas sitting next to her, age 3, and she was saying there, and welcome everybody, welcome to News at 1. And today we have with us Gordon Brooks, who's going to tell us why he wants to be an astronaut. Gordon Brooks. And turning around to Douglas, why would you like to be an astronaut? And he says, I don't know.
Looking at the Soviet Union, it's an incredible time, East-West relations with the Berlin Wall and things. Looks like it's coming down, but everything's happening over in the East. It's a tremendous time to go over there. It's fantastic. Yeah, looking forward to it.
The world of popular science and technology comes alive with Perspective, Discovery's international award-winning series. From computers to the ozone layer, from rainforests to chemical research. Perspective on our own world, a world of easily accessible insights into exacting sciences. Perspective, the Discovery Channel gives you a unique perspective into the world on Mondays and Fridays.
Coming to Centre Parks was one of my better ideas. It's lovely, and the villa's terrific. The children are in their element. I've hardly seen them. Even Sue's found some time for herself. We've sailed, played tennis, relaxed, not to mention the golf, and the horse riding. Yes, it's good here.
Centre Parks. Ring for the brochure. The British holiday the weather can't spoil.
Sharkoff, I will conquer the sea, the air, the earth, a universe.
In an effort to save the Earth from interplanetary peril, Flash Gordon and the beautiful Dale Arden match with swiftly.
Tell that from Ming immediately.
And his terrifying armies of doom. Will Flash triumph over the evil Ming?
Your Majesty, don't wish to be disturbed, but it is silence.
Flash Gordon, a new breed of hero.
Moscow is littered with heroic evidence of the Soviet Union's passion for space travel. From the early days of this century, when the scientific theories of spaceflight were pioneered by Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, the Soviet Union has concentrated its national energies on staying ahead in the space race. The vast stainless steel statue of Yuri Gagarin is the most vivid demonstration of the continuing priority enjoyed by space in the USSR.
Главное, подъем.
Вот сейчас вы наблюдаете, можно сказать,
Today, TV spectaculars from the Mir space station feature regularly on Soviet television, a rare distraction from the empty shelves of Mr. Gorbachev's Russia. Cosmonauts offer guided tours and national pride to millions. In 1991, a British astronaut will be able to join the show. But for now, 24 hours after their arrival, the British candidates are firmly earthbound in the Moscow suburbs, installed behind the walls of a special clinic.
the medical test this afternoon. We're going to...
What are they going to do with it?
The standard procedures, by the sound of it, is that we're going to have the neurological examination this afternoon.
Neurology.
Neurology.
What is that, Dr. Brooks?
We've mainly been round about our little penthouse suite, but we have been out running around the perimeter of the hospital, and we made a run at the gates once, but we didn't get through. The guards looked a little bit cross, but they didn't have any weapons.
We don't really know what's going on, and it would be nice to see the city. We haven't actually got to see it yet. But the worst thing really is the fact that it's a pretty small area we're living in. Not just here, but I mean outside around the fence line and everything. It'd be nice to be able to get outside the gate, that's all.
Privyet, and welcome to Hospital Number 6, the military wing of the said same hospital. And here we have Aquanaut Brooks's room. If you'd like to come in and just have a look, here we have the bed with an oxygen supply for the nighttime alcoholic post-haze, and outside a fresh carpet of snow. And moving on now, we have the regulation pyjamas, new today, and, of course, the bottoms with a loose elastic. I think that's about it in here. Let's move on now to Tim's room. And here we have a complete mess, as you'd expect from an army officer. Right next door to that, the 24-hour urine collection. Now we're back into the civilian side. And, oh, if we pause to go over here, we have the penthouse suite of Clive, astronaut Clive, the muscly astronaut hero. Along the corridor, on the same floor, this is Helena's complex. And round the corner... Hi, boys. This is convenient. Here we have a group of astronaut candidates. I'm on film here, boys. Just sitting down for their official bread.
That one's that way. That one is that way.
The Soviet medical tests begin with routine eye checks at the clinic. The tests here in Moscow over the next few days will have an important role in assessing the candidates and in determining the final selection of the 2 who will continue with astronaut training in the Soviet Union. But for the 4 Britons, it's a frustratingly slow start.
People who haven't met us before have just been having a look themselves to see if what's written down in the documents is actually true. That's basically all that they've done. It's been pretty boring, actually, really.
We've been told that the process is that the mission director will eventually make up his mind, but he'll be working on certain sources of data. The medical results are one, and the Soviets will also give their priority.
So it won't be right through till the end till they know exactly. We have no feedback on that at the moment. We've seen Moscow just from the insides of the limits, the fences that we've got here on site. So we're here, we're almost there, but we haven't seen the Kremlin yet, we haven't seen Red Square.
Beyond the walls of Clinic Number 6, for the ordinary citizens of Moscow, there are other priorities in the winter of 1989. In the 4th year of Mr. Gorbachev's perestroika, times are still hard and queues are still long. Popular feeling about the space program is inevitably mixed.
Я думаю, эти деньги лучше выпустить, чтобы в магазинах были продукты, мыло и вообще все остальное.
С космоса на Землю опуститься.
Если это космическая программа в мирных целях, я согласен, но если военных, я против.
Ну, они идут не только на военные, они идут, там же много и лекарства, и то все, исследования идут такие в народное хозяйство. Так что надо тратить, но...
Як космос рухає вперед прогрес, технологій.
Я вообще думаю, что космос, зачем он нужен? Если он в газетах пишет инопланетяне, планет прилетает, вот, а в контакт не вступает. Зачем-то космос нужен тогда?
On Gorky Street in central Moscow, a new Estee Lauder cosmetic shop opened a couple of days ago. People have been queuing for 4 hours already. and they expect to wait another 3 before they reach that rare lipstick or perfume.
Я считаю, что для всех ближе здесь в очереди стоящих, что это самая жизненно важная проблема. Не будет чем накраситься, не будет чего вкусно поесть, где там думать о космосе.
Дело в том, что космос далеко, а все остальное рядом, и поэтому мы ощущаем, так сказать, то, что близко и рядом.
Нам не говорит.
Star City, 10 miles outside Moscow, is the heart of Soviet space training. This is where cosmonauts live and learn their trade. Star City is a town of 4,000 people, a home for cosmonauts' families, as well as a unique center of space technology. It's here that the 2 successful British candidates will come to live during 18 months of intensive preparation for space. Today, Star City is the destination for an eagerly anticipated day trip, a welcome reprieve after days of medical testing behind the walls of Clinic number 6. In the early days of Soviet space training 30 years ago, expertise and technology were inevitably in short supply. Today in Star City, Helen Sharman is subjected to more sophisticated torments.
It can be very disorientating. It can make you nauseous, but it depends on what sort of tolerance you've got. But it will make you feel, although you won't actually be doing it, like you're sitting on a swing. So if you've got your eyes shut and you've got no means of saying whether that is happening or not, then you can make yourself feel ill because you've got no way of knowing that you're not really falling over, apart from grabbing hold of the chair. And after a while, because she's going to be on it for 10 minutes, 10 minutes on the swing with your eyes shut can make you feel a little bit ill.
Oh, I feel fine. I'm not dizzy now. I was when the chair first stopped. I felt like I was going in the opposite direction.
For Clive Smith, there's a more arduous ordeal, the Star City centrifuge. There was an error during his centrifuge test in Britain, and now he must repeat the experience of being whirled around at 8 times the force of gravity. First, he has to understand the complex instructions of the Soviet supervisor.
В каждой строчке находятся кольца.
And then there's that circle.
Wait, is he going to ask me questions about this? Yeah, not too bad. They're taking my blood pressure now and things. And my heart rate. See how much it's gone up by.
Is it scary?
Not really. No, because I've done it at Farnborough and I know the type of sensation that's gonna go on, and they're gonna stay at 8G for about 40 seconds.
For all Clive's familiarity with the stress of the centrifuge, his heart rate is up, and he has to be ordered to relax. A first test is suspended at 4G.
But you think you'll be all right when we get to 8? Ну, думаю, что...
Расслабление полное получилось у него.
Did you manage to relax completely?
No, I wasn't completely relaxed.
Why did you manage to relax completely?
At last, it's decided that Clive is ready for 8G.
4, 5, 6, 8.
At 8 times the force of gravity, Clive's body will feel to weigh about 100 stones. His breathing will be a huge labor. When it's all over, Clive's verdict is suitably laconic.
So it's all quite exciting stuff. Yeah.
You see a training complex on the MIR program, orbiting now at the present time.
The spectacular centerpiece of the visit to Star City is a sight of the full-scale training simulator of the Mir space station. This is where the successful British astronaut will train for a job in space. The Juno astronaut will work in Mir alongside Soviet cosmonauts on a range of experiments in microgravity. Plans include the development of pure crystals, which could point the way to a cure for AIDS, and new alloys which could revolutionize car engines. They'll also research the problems of brittle bones. The man responsible for Juno's medical testing, Dr. James Witchells, has learned from a Soviet cosmonaut some personal consequences of weightlessness.
One of the medical things he pointed out was that in a weightless situation, the gravity is missing, therefore the fluid from your lower limbs comes up into your chests. And one of the interesting points he raised was that the men develop breasts, and you become very full in the face, you have red eyes. It settles after a day or two, but that was an interesting thing that he mentioned, that it's quite uncomfortable to begin with until the body readjusts.
Yes, I'd love to go and do some work in that.
The last spectacle of the day for the Juno candidates. This is where the rehearsals for weightlessness will begin, in Star City's vast water tank. The end of the first week in Moscow and another fall of snow. For Gordon Brooks, a new test in a new location, Moscow's heart hospital. Soviet doctors have detected a faint murmur in Gordon's heart and need to conduct a more detailed examination. Dr. James Witchells has found that Soviet space medicine is very demanding.
Well, in Britain, we have so little experience in the selection process for potential astronauts. And what we found as abnormalities and thought that for living purposes and even sporting purposes were not significant. The Soviets have felt that they were significant. I think if they came up with any abnormalities that we did not, on the same tests, I think that could influence the decision.
After 7 days in Moscow, the Juno candidates escaped from Clinic number 6, fleeing onto the film crew bus for a spot of illicit sightseeing.
I don't even think that the rest of the hospital know that we've got out yet. I think they think we're still talking to you in the lobby.
Do you want to go back?
Not particularly. I'd like to see Red Square.
We've seen absolutely nothing of Moscow. We've just sort of been in buses to a different hospital and then in a bus out to Star City.
Well, I'm almost completely institutionalised now. So I'm quite frightened being in this bus, actually, out. But I believe we're on our way to Red Square.
They're not going to let anybody with a gun go in there, are they?
Oh, we'll take a picture of the school children.
Yeah, they're good, aren't they?
Smile.
It's all like little bits made up into one, because it seems so separate.
What have you to sell?
No, I want trading.
Oh, trade?
Yeah, you want to trade something?
Well, the only people we've talked to, of course, are the people who come up offering us things. And I think Tim turned down quite a good offer. It was, I think, it was a military hat for his Juno badge, which and there are lots of Juno badges, and he probably done quite well on that. And he wouldn't have needed a receipt either. True. I want to see more. Let's go.
Let's go.
At the Space Museum, the Juno 4 have a chance for a close encounter with the cramped Soyuz capsule, which will carry one of them to the space station.
Well, you might have to spend 2 days in there. It's sort of very small and very heavy. That's call a really ballistic vehicle, you know. It's like a cannonball.
I think we've all been selected for our size partially, but yes, we're all fit in. It reminds me very much of diving bells, which I'm familiar with, but certainly not spent that length of time in a diving bell, a day or two.
The comparison of sizes between the craft here and the American craft it's docked on one of the displays That surprised me, the quite a large difference in sizes. It wouldn't matter to me personally who I was travelling with.
No.
Anyway, it comes back by parachute, and I understand those. I can handle that.
Mission control at Kaliningrad near Moscow is the communications center of the Soviet space program. At this moment, the controllers are hearing from the crew of the Mir space station passing over the Pacific Ocean.
Is it possible to have people sitting here during the British launch?
But today, the scientists at Mission Control are involved with a novel kind of communication. Peter Graham, the Juno mission director, is here with a delegation of marketing people to explore the prospects for advertising and merchandising on the Soyuz rocket, which will carry the first commercial astronaut into orbit.
The staff at the centre will also be working on the data that is received from the spacecraft. So far, this is the biggest scale plan for publicity and advertising material. It will be the first time that you've got to. When it comes to the words that you want to write on, and then if you have shining, reflective, fluorescent colours, that's all right.
On the marketing side, what we want to do is be able to give the maximum exposure to the companies involved in the project. Therefore, we have to see physically where we can brand different areas, whether it be mission control as we're in now, or the rockets, or the launch vehicle area. So really, it's an opportunity to sit down and see exactly what things are like physically. And they've been quite good in suggesting new ideas, which we wouldn't have thought of because we haven't been associated with space travel before. There's a post office actually in Mir, and they physically stamp envelopes and stamps up there, and they've suggested this is one area of commercial exploitation. They've suggested that everybody here in Mission Control could wear a corporate uniform of a company that wanted to sponsor the mission. Yeah, they're excellent businessmen. I think they've developed a keen sense over the changing times recently.
The times are changing too for the Soviet space industry, and the Juno project is a striking indicator of the new priorities of Mr. Gorbachev's high-risk revolution. For the Soviets, Juno is about politics and money and the rewards of scientific cooperation. The head of Glabkosmos, the Soviet organization which exploits space, spells out the realities.
Первый аспект – это все-таки привлечение, научного технического потенциала других стран в нашу программу. И второй аспект, все-таки заключается в том, что мы стоим за то, чтобы частично компенсировать те затраты на космос, которые, вы прекрасно понимаете, сейчас достаточно большие.
For the four candidates competing to be Britain's first astronaut, the final round of their selections here in Moscow has meant 10 days of prodding and testing and retesting.
Having numerous doctors look down my throat so many times, I don't think it'll ever be the same again. They've poked into our ears and up our noses. But really, there's not been that much to do. There's been a lot of free time. We've played lots of chess.
Now their quarantine and their suspense are coming to an end. Tomorrow, the Soviet Medical Commission will tell them how they've measured up.
We probably all have in our own minds our own order of priority, the people that we would choose. But we're a team, and there's no point in us making those sort of decisions, especially as we don't have all the information.
No, I don't know whether there's a pecking order yet or not. Presumably there isn't yet, because the Soviets haven't yet made their decision.
But we talk about the tests, but it's not... We know that each of us has got no idea, and we know that we're not going to know until we're all told together. So there's going to be no inkling. Nobody's going to know before the rest of us.
No idea whatsoever. You get no indication because there is no indication. There are so many individual tests, and individuals look at their results and then put them before a huge panel who will then come up with their pecking order.
Decision day. A commission of 38 eminent doctors has come to clinic number 6 to make their final judgment. But first, the four candidates must go through one more round of medical checks.
It looks as if there are several specialist teams, and they all have to rubber stamp the documents with a yes or no. And then presumably there will be some overall meeting and then the decisions will be made from the Soviet side.
At last, after 2 hours of further tests, the Commission are ready to deliver their decision on the medical fitness of the 4 British candidates. They will be summoned, one at a time, to hear their verdicts. The chairman of the Medical Commission tells Helen Sharman that she's been approved without reservation.
I have no questions, just that I hope very much I'm selected, and I will look forward to coming back to Moscow.
Надеемся, что вы приедете в Советский Союз.
When the Commission begins to discuss Tim Mace, it becomes apparent that there's a potential problem. It emerges that Tim's heartbeat is very slightly faster than normal, and the doctors disagree about how serious this might be. Peter Howard, the chief Juno doctor, is unhappy with this late objection.
And I am surprised that there is now dissent over these findings.
Прошу садиться. Sit down, thank you.
Finally, the Commission agrees that Tim Mace is fit to take up astronaut training. Clive Smith is told that he must have his tonsils removed, and he too will then be fit. The Soviet doctors are tough critics of foreign candidates, and recently they've rejected people from Japan and France. Now, for Gordon Brooks, there's a shock and a big disappointment.
Мистер Брукс, и пришла к заключению, что вы временно негодны к специальным тренировкам.
His tonsils make him unfit, and he'll be reassessed in 3 months after their removal.
Может быть, вы не согласны с этим решением?
Perhaps you do not agree to this decision.
No. There's no problem. I've never known I've had any problem with my tonsils, but I accept your decision.
Вот наше решение. Желаю вам всего самого доброго.
Okay.
До свидания. Ну все, у нас вопросы еще есть у членов комиссии? Нет?
It was very important first step for all.
Thank you very much. I shall look forward to seeing you again in Star City.
I am sure. See you later.
Well, it's just a disappointment, obviously.
And rather a sudden thing as well, or have you been sort of preparing for this possibility?
Well, the idea is not to build yourself up too much until you get onto the training. So I think I've been doing that. And so I'm happy with the decision, as much as I can be.
It is very important to all of us, and always has been. And there's going to be 2 disappointed, very disappointed people who don't go and do the training.
The 2 who are not selected, I shall feel sad for them, of course. But they're a jolly good bunch, all of them. They really are. And the decisions to which 2 will come for training will, of course, be made in a couple of days' time, and it will be made on other factors than the medical ones.
For the 4 candidates, there's one last ordeal, a live television special from the Science Museum in London to announce the final 2. It's only a few hours since they got back from Moscow, and they're still unsure who will be selected to return for astronaut training. From Moscow, Juno board member Jack Leeming delivers the verdict.
It's been a very difficult choice to make between 4 such very fine candidates, and while I commiserate with the other 2, I am delighted to announce that the board have selected Helen Sharman and Tim Mace.
Let's not forget Clive Smith and Gordon Brooks, who, of course, naturally will be very disappointed, but who will continue to play a crucial role in the Juno mission. And once again, congratulations to our astronauts.
Well done. Yeah.
Tim, please. I don't know. I can't even think of it at the moment. I feel really pleased that I get the chance to go back and work there. And then, obviously, between the two of us, we've got to fight it out.
We've got 3 days now to sort out the whole thing before I have to pack my bags and leave. I don't know for how many months before I'll be able to come back. Right from things like I've got a car, I've got a house to sort out, my bank accounts, my access bills, right through the little things like buying some shampoo, perhaps a toilet roll, things like that I'm going to need.
Departing for space was a more heroic business when Yuri Gagarin made his pioneering liftoff in 1961. He made history and returned to the inevitable hero's welcome. These days, it seems, setting out for space is a more down-to-earth affair. Now, Helen Sharman and Tim Mace must survive 18 months of tough training in the Soviet Union. And, in the end, only one of them can be the winner of that prize called Mission Juno.